The year is approximately 1300 BC. The Lord has revealed himself to his people and the Egyptians through a series of plagues, as well as the parting of the Red Sea. Moses may have been God's mouthpiece, but it was God's presence that guided the Israelites through the wilderness in the form of a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Moses himself became a constant reminder of the Lord's presence as he bore the Lord's dimmed yet overwhelming glory every time he met with the Lord on Mount Sinai or in the newly constructed tabernacle. The Lord's glory, although dimmed by Moses' humanity, was so bright that the people of Israel could not bear to look on Moses without a face covering that wasn't protecting his people from COVID-19, but the magnificent glory of God that was too bright for Israel's eyes. The people of Israel had all the proof of God's existence that a person could desire, but as Pastor John mentioned a few weeks ago, the people failed to trust him. Although there were complaints by the people of Moses' absence at Mount Sinai, the Lord's ominous glory was visible and could be felt by the people. But instead of fearing the Lord, they created a golden calf. A calf, they claimed, delivered them from Egypt. There are many who bemoan the lack of God's physical presence, claiming that if he were visible like in the wilderness days of Israel or Jesus' time, they could believe. But in both situations, there were relatively few people who believed and trusted in God or Christ, despite their physical presence and miraculous works. Today, God's presence lacks the visibility we desire, so we often erroneously gauge his presence, approval, or trustability by our own fickle state of mind, societal success, or desired environment. Let's travel back a little further to approximately 1700 BC, where a young teenage boy, approximately 17 years of age, has been mistreated and sold into slavery by his own brothers to some traveling Ishmaelites, who later sold him to the captain of the guard in Egypt. Joseph, his father's favorite, knew little about hard labor. His hope for the fruition of what appeared to be divine dreams of his future greatness and authority over his family must have seemed unattainable in his current condition. Joseph, unlike his descendants, never experienced a physical manifestation of the Lord. Yet the Lord's presence was obvious, not only to Joseph, but to the captain of the guard, one who knew nothing about God. Genesis 39, 2-7 says, "The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight, and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house, and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had, in the house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, and you might think, well, he was a slave, but at least he was a powerful slave to a powerful master. It could be worse. You also might be thinking, of course Joseph is faithful to God. The Lord made lemonade out of lemons. First, keep in mind, Joseph was still a slave. He was not free to determine the course of his life. Second, if you will remember, Joseph's life takes another turn for the worse. He was falsely accused of rape after having been faithful to his master's authority and, more importantly, to the Lord. He was no longer the highly respected slave, but was now a prisoner. It may have seemed to him like he had been abandoned by God, as he likely felt he was forgotten, lacked purpose, and was wasting away in prison. But Joseph, despite this, remained faithful to the Lord. Had God abandoned Joseph? No. Genesis 39, 21-23 says, "But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him steadfast love, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. and the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. Joseph is eventually released from prison after interpreting a dream of Pharaoh's, when no one else could. It turns out that Joseph's earlier dreams were divine messages from God. Not only would he rise in power above his father and brothers, but he would become second in command in the nation of Egypt. He has become significantly greater than he ever could have imagined. Now, before we get too comfortable in our cozy chairs and think, now that is the kind of story I like. Everything turned out well. I want us to put ourselves in Joseph's situation. He was enslaved and imprisoned for 13 years. His 20s were completely lost. He was separated from his father and everything he knew in a foreign land that did not serve or know his God. He lacked the freedom to make decisions for himself, and after having been obedient to the Lord and loyal to his master, he is framed and rewarded with time in prison, where he serves everyone but himself. He was forgotten. And although he was set free from prison, he is still stuck in a foreign land without his family. His life is forever and completely changed. It will never be the same. Joseph, unlike us, doesn't have the book of Genesis in his hands to tell him, as it tells us, of God's presence. But he continues to trust the Lord and obey him as though the Lord was present, because Joseph knew he was present. We too are living in difficult and uncertain times. Everything seems turned upside down, and our whole world seems to be spinning out of control. It may seem like God's presence is absent as we try to right our circumstances and our world. But like Joseph, we may find that our world is forever changed. We may not be able to restore our lives or the nation to the way they were. So what do? We need to live our lives like Joseph did in the knowledge of the Lord's presence, despite the erroneous feelings to the contrary. We need to become more like Christ, whose life ambition was to glorify God in obedience through love toward God and others. We also need to look for God's presence in the darkness. We need to look for where he is working and look for what he is doing. How do we do that? By remembering the words of James 1:17. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Anything good that comes out of these tragedies or our life circumstances in general are a gift from the Lord and are signals of his presence. Are you spending more quality time with family, even if it's on Zoom because of COVID-19? Have you seen police officers praying with the protesters? Or have you seen where others have been cleaning up and helping retailers with their businesses that have been burned to the ground? These are examples of God's active and working presence in our lives and in the lives of the people around us.